Welcome to this episode of the Doug Sanquist Podcast. Where interested is interesting, and interesting people share their stories and build their biographies along the way. I'm your host, Doug Sanquist. I'm a dentist and a photographer, and now a podcast host. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Doug Sanquist, and on Facebook, Doug Sanquist Photo. You can join our email list by going to DougSanquistPodcast.com. And today's guest is Dr. Tom Trinkner. Hey, Tom.
Hey, what's up, Doug? Pleasure to be here.
All right, cool. Thanks for joining me today. And as with all of our guests, I don't have a bio, and I have not read a bio, but I will tell you that I met Tom a couple years ago. Not at a dental conference. I know that's lots of my dental friends I meet that way, but I actually met him on one of our photography trips. He decided to come on a couple of them a couple years ago, and that's how I first met him. So I really know Tom more outside of dentistry than I do inside of dentistry, which is kind of a cool. We're both dentists, but I almost know him a little bit better outside of the dental world than inside. And of course, that's the goal of this podcast, is to discover Tom's real biography. You okay with that?
Yes, for sure.
All right, cool. So to start off, I have a list of 10 quick and easy starter questions. There are no maybes here. Yes, no, or pick one. You got that?
Yes.
All right, cool. So gummy bears or M&Ms?
Oh, boy. Gummy bears.
Okay, cool. Sweet or salty?
I guess can't mix them together, can I?
No, you can't. You got to pick one. I know you're thinking of that. I know you're thinking of the peanut butter bar. You know, the payday bar. I know you're thinking of that bar, but you can't pick that.
I'm thinking of popcorn mixed in a bag. It's kind of like crack. I'll go salty.
Okay, cool. Hot or cold?
Cold.
And you live in South Carolina. Go
Yes.
figure, right? Would you ever wear flip-flops to Disney World?
No way.
Are you an early riser or a night owl?
Early.
All right. Cow or chicken?
Chicken.
Okay. Short hair or long hair?
Short.
Tattoos, yay or nay?
Nay.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Cake or pie?
Cake.
And the bonus question, sauerkraut, love it or hate it?
Love it.
Cool. There are some people. There are. I have had a couple. I get some hated. So one person didn't even know what it was, which is kind of cool. You know.
It's got to be on a big hot dog with some chili. Oof.
Cool. All right, Tom. Where were you born?
I was born in a smaller farm town called Mount Vernon, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And probably back in my high school days, we had a class of about 250.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of cows and pigs and lots of farmers.
Mm-hmm.
Great people, though. Really wonderful people.
Yeah, going to the state fair was probably a big deal, huh? Or the county fair or whatever it was.
County fair, tractor pull. Yeah, you got to live for that.
So what was your earliest childhood memory that you can remember?
Fond memories would be canoe trips down one of the rivers with my dad and my dad's best friend and his son, who I later went to college with. And I remember how much fun that was, but I also remember flipping out of the canoe and looking up in the water, seeing my dad's hand there pulling me out. It's like one of those horror movies, you know?
Yeah, I actually have a memory kind of like that. We were river rafting in the eastern Tennessee down there, and we were going over this waterfall where we went out and we scoped it all out. We go, I was like 7 years old, and we go and we're like scoping it out, and we go down this waterfall, and everything was fine. And then we hit a bump, and I flip out of the boat, and also. And all I remember was the river route guide. I like that picture. Like I'm coming up out of the water. All I see is his hand literally coming from my life jacket. Yeah, the hand coming right from my life jacket and just literally pulled me into the boat like with one arm. I mean, I think he had to been the adrenaline had to be going crazy because he literally just yanked me out of the water into the boat. I mean, it was like in one fell swoop, you know?
It's amazing. You probably still have dreams of how big that hand was.
Yeah, because it's kind of like coming out of the water and you're kind of like, where am I? And all of a sudden here comes this hand, you know? So,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's amazing.
that's, that's cool. So would you like camp on the river, or would you just like do like day trips, or would you do
It
like?
was more day trip stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then my grandparents, my dad was a really good golfer and grew up on a golf course. He
Mm-hmm.
was an only child, and my grandparents lived on the golf course.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather had a golf cart, and
Oh.
so a lot of my childhood was spending time on the golf course or driving the golf cart around or playing golf.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was a dentist, so a lot of summers he was at work, and my time was hanging out with my grandparents. So that
Yeah.
was really fond
Yeah.
memories.
So most of your summers were pretty much on the golf course, hanging out, at your grandparents' house,
Yeah,
stuff like
yeah,
that.
doing a lot of that kind of thing. Yeah, and just swimming pool there, and just we had a lot of friends that were members. It was a 9-hole course, so
Right.
it wasn't like going to Augusta National.
Yeah.
Let's put it
It
that
wasn't like
way.
Caddy. It wasn't like Caddyshack either. It
It
wasn't
was
snooty. It was not
no,
snooty like Caddyshack.
no, not snooty at all.
How far is that from like Jack Nicklaus territory, or like where Jack Nicklaus grew
Very
up?
close.
Is it?
Yeah, very close. Only like 50 minutes or so.
Okay.
And of course, Jack set a precedent for golf in the entire world, and lots of good golfers came out of that era
Mm-hmm.
as a result of what he, I think, contributed to golf. In
Right.
fact, there was a course I used to go to when I was probably in high school or in college. It was not to be a prejudice against the female race, but this course was called the golf course, and the only time women were allowed on the property was I think Christmas Eve, if I recall.
Oh wow.
And so
Different
when you
time back
came
then
in,
for sure, right?
different time, yeah. And so when you came into this country club, it was literally like you were walking into the locker room.
Hmm.
All you saw was lockers with names on it, and it's a very, very famous, very high end golf course just for male members. And of course, that has since changed dynamically. But those were the days back then. It was
Yeah.
pretty interesting.
That wasn't interesting. I mean, it's kind of interesting to flash back to those times and think, how did they, yeah, that couldn't work out today. And
No,
it's probably for the better. I mean,
well, and frankly, there were women's golf leagues, and the women did play, but typically at a course like the ones that we were members of, there were only one or two really good women players,
mm-hmm.
and women had like a Wednesday morning. That was their league
Right.
day. And that was a lot of times the only time you saw them out there.
Right. Yeah. That's true.
So, it was very different times.
Yep. And something changed. I mean, change is always a constant, I guess. Right.
Oh yeah. And you see some of these college women now. I know when I go to hit balls at the place where I'm membership now, I mean, these high school girls that are 12 and 13 and 14, their swings are unbelievable.
Yeah, the talent is amazing in women's golf today. I mean, it's
phenomenal. Yeah,
shocking, like how good they are. Yeah. So, did you ever work at the golf course, or what was your first job? Remember as a kid?
well, besides mowing the yard for my dad,
Yep.
and going into his office some, but technically, I think the first real serious job didn't happen till college.
Mm-hmm.
And my first summer home, I worked in a window factory. And
What'd you do in the window factory?
I was on the line that fed glass into a machine that cleaned the glass. And then at the other end, you'd pick the glass up and make a body rotation and set it into a frame.
Wow.
And that was an exceptionally tedious, boring, horrible job. And it was a very nice company, and they shipped windows all over the U.S. back then. And sadly, there were people that had been there for 15 or 20 years working, doing the same thing.
Wow.
So my highlight of the day was actually when the food truck pulled up on breaks at like 10 and 2 in the afternoon, and you got to get out of there and get
Get
out
your
of some
microwave
fresh
burrito.
air.
Get your microwave
That's
burrito,
right.
right?
That's exactly right. It was, and then I moved on to the next summer working for the state road crew, and I was a flagger.
Uh-huh.
And I moved asphalt around when it was coming out of the back end of a big dump truck, and I mowed state parks and cut grass along the side of the interstate or the freeways, and it was just
that had to be more fun,
crazy.
though, right?
It was more fun.
That had to be more fun. I bet those road crews are pretty cool sometimes. I mean, they're the guys are great
crew,
if they're cool. The guys are cool. They can be fun.
It was good. It was different.
So your dad was a dentist. So was that always something that you thought you would always do, or how did you decide to actually become a dentist as well?
Yeah, I really, I spent a lot of time in his office. My dad practiced in a very unique fashion. He had a front desk girl, and he did all the cleanings, and he had no dental assistant. So it was, and 2 operatories and a little lab and a little teeny private office, and just very old school dentistry, but he enjoyed it. He graduated from dental school from Ohio State in the mid 50s, almost prior to the time of high-speed handpieces. Right. So I remember as a kid going in and I had the belt drive handpieces.
Wow.
You had the spittoon. It had a hydraulic chair you had to pump up with your foot. And even back then, we didn't do a lot of sit-down dentistry. That my dad stood up for a good part of his career.
Wow. And
so, I just remember the smells, and I remember going in and doing, pouring up stone and doing fun things back then. And the mechanics of it, the little toys, the little things you play with, the little burrs.
Right.
You throw some mercury out on a little plate and move it around.
Yeah, those are the days, right?
That's probably why I'm still crazy to this time.
Yeah, the mercury and the cheesecloth, and you're just kind of
that's it.
Mix it together,
Yeah, you grew up in it, so
yeah.
So I would definitely say probably by junior year in high school that I was on that path. I knew that's what I wanted to do. And so when I went away to college, we had spent a lot of summers in Cape Cod. I had cousins that lived there, and we would go for 2 or 3 weeks at a time in the summer. And we would take a 4-wheel Blazer and we'd tow a trailer behind, and we rented these cottages. But there was a place called the Outer Beach off the coast of Cape Cod, in a little town, Orleans and Eastham, up in that area. And we would let the air out of the tires, and there was a special area that you could drive all the way out on this beach, and there would be nobody around you for miles. And I fell in love with the ocean at that time. So when I went away to college, just from those experiences for so many years, I knew I wanted to be a dentist, but I didn't want to be the typical pre-dental, pre-med person. So I decided that I wanted to major in marine biology.
Oh, wow.
And so the programs in marine biology, especially in the South Carolina area, were really pretty well known back then. And so that's kind of what drove me to apply to some more of the southern schools. I was kind of sick of the cold in Ohio. And long story short, I got into the program at South Carolina, University of South Carolina, which had a really good marine biology program. And that's what my degree was in.
Oh, wow.
So, but all along, same path was going to be dental school.
Okay. So you're going to be a marine biologist dentist.
Correct. Yeah. It was just a great experience to be able to do different kinds of studies. You still had to have the same requirements for dental school, but it got me out of that, that competitive challenge of college when you're in the same classes with every other person that wants to get into dental school or medical school, and they're all like geeking out, trying to fight for the A+++ on the test.
Right.
I didn't have that.
Yeah. And I think
was kind of separated from that.
Yeah. I think what people forget is that, I think there's two thoughts, or there's one main thought is that, by what you do in college will prepare you for whatever you do in graduate school. So if you're going to be a doctor, we'll take a whole bunch of undergraduate, anatomy and physiology and, plan to get prepared for medical school. And that's one path. And the other path is, once you get into professional school, you'll never be able to do anything other than just what they're giving you. So you should, anything that you are interested in that has an interest to you that you may not ever do a career in, you should do that before you go to professional school. So I think the idea of what you did is it
was awesome.
Yeah.
We had field trips to the coast. We had different kinds of projects that were due, and it was totally different than what a lot of the other geeks were going through. So
because when I went to college, I didn't know what to major in. So I kind of figured I was going to go to medical school or something. I initially was going to go to medical school, and then I changed to dental school. And then I'm like, well, so when I was going to medical school, I'll just get a biochem degree because that's what all the medical students did. And I quickly realized that I was not going to stand out as a biochemist going to medical school. That was not going to help me along the way at all. And so I actually, I switched to dental school like halfway through my freshman year, and I dropped my degree altogether. And I just decided to get on a path to get my requirements, get into dental school as fast as I could. And I never got a degree, but the last 2.5 years, I pretty much just took my requirements plus all the classes I wanted to take. So I did a lot of art classes just to get through. And I should have gotten an art degree.
In hindsight, I wish I'd done more finance. And that's I have a 16-year-old. I'm really, he says he wants to be a dentist, but I'm not waiting around too long for that to figure out whether that comes through. But finance degree, something in business world, I don't think you can go wrong. You always have a double major. So
yeah, you can always do something.
We'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty cool. So then you did marine biology, and then you got into dental school. And then where'd you go to dental school?
I trained at Ohio State.
Okay.
So
you had to go back home. There. Yeah.
I went, well, at the time, it was really one of the better schools in the country. And they were switching out of a 3-year program into a 4-year program. So I was the first 4-year class. And the class size was, I think my class was 210 students at the time. So they were big classes. And my dad had gone to school there. So I wouldn't say I had an in because he had been out for some time. It was at the latter part of his practice. So, but I have to say, being at a big university, going from South Carolina to Ohio State was a pretty huge change. But you're isolated in your little pocket of that dental world. But still, it's the opportunities for intramural sports or to do different things on campus or go to the Ohio State games. And there's just a lot of variety, a lot of opportunity at a bigger school. And we had a super tight class. We had a really great class, and it was just an awesome experience. Still stay in touch with quite a few of them. So
that's cool. And so then after school, where'd you end? And you decided to go back to South Carolina? Is that pretty much
so after when I was in college, I had a roommate who came to dental school at Ohio State. He was a couple years behind me. And his uncle was a dentist in South Carolina, and he had 3 offices. So back then, this would have been 1983. To have 3 offices was way ahead of what we would term today maybe the corporate trail.
Right.
So he needed some help to manage those 3 offices. They were in small towns, and so I came back to one of the small towns and got an apartment and decided I was going to work for him and start to learn some dentistry and just develop a pulse for who Tom was in the dental world, and learn some business and et cetera, et cetera. Well, I lasted about 10 months because I basically didn't have a lot of a social life. And I kept going back to Columbia, South Carolina, where University of South Carolina is, which was probably an hour away. And those trips were my weekends. And then I'd go back to my little apartment and do dentistry. So I just felt like the experience was good, but it wasn't going to be a home for me. So eventually I decided I'm just going to gut it out. I'm going to go from scratch. I'm going to pick an area and I'm going to set up my own practice. And so in August of '84, I opened my practice from scratch. I had one assistant, I had 2 operatories and no patients. And that's where everything began. So,
and that's how it started. And you've been there ever since?
I've been in Columbia ever since, pretty much in the same area. I'm in my second office now, which I built about 25 years ago. And this will be where I finish out dentistry probably.
Yeah. No sense in going anywhere else.
No.
Yeah.
Or changing a whole lot right now. The office is real. It's real open, real airy, lots of light, lots of lofted ceilings. It's a really great environment. So I decided when I was going to build it, I wanted it nice and clean and simple, and it's held up the test of time so far. So
yeah, and how COVID changes it, who knows? So that's
who knows?
We won't worry about that today, right?
You know those big bubble things that you get in and you like run and smash into each other. It's a game.
We might do that.
I'm serious. We might just all be in one of those things, rolling around.
It's true. I mean, right now in 2020, it's an interesting, if we go back to when we come back to listen to this in 10 years, it would be interesting to see where we ended up.
It sure will. It definitely will.
Nobody, hopefully we're all still here and healthy and everything will be fine. So, what things kept you entertained other than dentistry during the early years? Like, how'd you get your hobbies and stuff like that? What'd you do for fun? I know golf was one of them, but what else did you do?
Golf is one of them. When I moved to Columbia, we have a really big man-made lake here. And so I moved in with a couple of friends of mine in a little condo on the lake. And so we spent a lot of time on the lake and skiing and just sailing and fishing, and all kinds of different things are available there. The beach to Charleston takes about 2 hours to get to Charleston. It's ranked one of the top cities in the whole country to see. It's about 2.5 hours to Myrtle Beach, so I spent a lot of time at the beach there. It's about 2.5, 3 hours to the mountains up towards Asheville. And so my early days with a couple friends, we did lots of backpacking, just going out for long weekends. And I had never done that. So I was really kind of a rookie jumping into that. And they were, that's another whole book I could write. Just
if you're not a backpacker and you go out with some seasoned backpackers, it can be a little intimidating.
It's brutal.
It
is brutal.
They have all their gear and all their stuff, and you're like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do.
I gotta tell you my first story because they just thought it was so funny. So these guys were very seasoned, and it's a lot like our photo stuff that you got me, and you and Bernie got me into a couple years ago. There's a whole parameter of gear that you got to have. And this is gear you can't really rent, or I guess you probably could, but when I started doing this years ago, there wasn't anything. So I was coerced into finding this certain backpack, and then I had to get Vask boots that were waterproof, and then you got to have cooking utensils and a little stove, and you got to put stuff into packages to carry your food. And so I'm buying all this gear. And one of the things that I had to get was either a hammock or something to sleep in. So there was a guy in Vermont that made these really cool hammocks. So you would string them between two trees, and they had a mosquito net that you'd zip yourself into. So you put a foam pad in there in your sleeping bag, and it still gets cold up in the mountain areas.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could be hiking in shorts and a shirt, and there's snow on the ground because you're sweating.
Yep.
So there's an awning or a tarp that goes into a tent shape that gets staked out, so you don't have any floor in the bottom underneath the hammock. So literally my first night, we're sitting around the campfire and we're eating, and you take something nice the first night, a bottle of wine or something to carry wine, and my buddy, the most seasoned and most obnoxious hiker, pulled out a can of sardines. And I was just, oh my God, what is that smell? That is just so nasty. And that was one of his favorite things to eat backpacking, was sardines. And we got through dinner and everything, and everybody decided to go to bed. Well, at this particular time, I had not had RK surgery on my eyes, so my vision was pretty poor. And I wore contacts, so I took my contacts out, I put them in my little case, and I got into my little hammock and zipped up my little mosquito net, and I'm asleep. And all of a sudden, and not knowing, I know we had hung our food because there are bears in the area. We hung them away from our campsite, and we are all split out into different distances. And so in the middle of the night, I hear something knock something over underneath my tarp. And then I hear something underneath my hammock. And I have no idea what it could be. I got no contacts in. I can't see. I got no light. I can't find the flashlight. So I'm rummaging around. Finally, I just said, I'm going to gut it out. I got a hold of the flashlight, I unzipped my mosquito net, rolled out, jumped to the ground, and I'm face to face with a skunk. And I swear to God, I almost died. I didn't make a move. And the skunk looked at me. He's like, should I go ahead and let it go? Should I not let it go? And thank the Lord, the skunk turned and hightailed it away from me. At which point I hear my buddy start to laugh. I'm screaming. It's skunk, and they start laughing. Well, my seasoned backpacker friend had taken the juice from the sardine can and poured it all around my hammock area. So that was my first experience. That was my initiation, you should say.
Did you go back with them?
I did hike with them a lot more. And, there was a lot of opportunity for retribution. So
okay, good. At least I hope you got them back a little bit.
Oh, right? You know that.
That's
many
cool.
times. Yeah,
I love the fact that you're willing to jump in. That you're willing to jump in and go have fun with. Even if it requires new skills. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was, to this day, some of the fondest memories in that era of my life. I was single, and it was just nice to get away to somewhere different. So
yeah, so you started your practice in '84 or so. So that was pretty much cosmetic dentistry was just kind of coming into being. So how did you?
Well, actually, it was way early. Actually, in 1989, I started realizing I needed some practice management skills, and so I hired Jim Pride's group, and I was a client of Dr. Pride for some time. He's since passed away, but he was really a forerunner in practice management back then, and I got to befriend him, and I said, what should I do next? And he said, you should go to the Pankey Institute. So I started going to Pankey in 1989. I did the first curriculum there. And at that curriculum, I went with one other guy from my town. And then we actually plugged into about 6 or 7 or 8 other guys. It's very, very much camaraderie, and we just really got along great. We'd go out at night and eat dinner together. And we said, we should all get together and do the next continuum. So we did that, and again, got to be closer friends. And the long story short, we went through all the continuums together as a group. And several of those people have come on to become faculty at Pankey, which I did for a number of years. And then I kind of realized that my dentistry was functionally good, but it just didn't look as good as I thought it could. So about 1995, a friend of mine, Joyce Bassett, who was also in my class at Ohio State, was coercing me to join the AACD, American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry. And it was a kind of a newer group, and there was an opportunity to become an accredited member. And I said, that's something I think I would like to do. There was nobody accredited in South Carolina. Mm-hmm. And so I realized that to make my dentistry better, to look better and be functionally sound, this would be a good avenue. And in doing that, photography became, it was starting to become something taught at Pankey, but it was in its very juvenile stages.
Right.
And so I said, I'm going to start taking pictures of everything I do. Well, and pictures were actually slides, clarify that. So we were doing lots and lots of slides. You take 36 shots of something and you get in the car and drive it down to the photo place to get developed. Yeah, the lab, and 3-4 days or 5 days later it'd come back. And that at that time you couldn't even sometimes get things processed quickly. It took time.
Yep.
And in order to judge your work, then you got to drop it into a slide projector, or you put it on a view box, and this whole gamut of things to try to improve your work. And so accreditation in the Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry was all done through photography, printed into books, and of course then it went into presentations with slides, and now everything's digital and raw.
Right.
So then I did that for a couple years, and I said, I was getting pretty good at it. And I decided, I went to a couple meetings that I was invited to, and I met this guy, Gary Severance, and Gary's now with Shine. He was with E4D for a long time in Dallas, but he was with Ivoclar for quite some years. And I sat with Gary at a meeting one time. I said, I kind of think that I'd like to take some of my work and maybe put it into a presentation and do a lecture somewhere. And I showed him some of my work, and he was like, yeah, it looks really good. I think this is something you could do, without totally realizing how much work goes into putting a lecture together. A, B, how totally petrified I was of public speaking.
Yep.
So, I think it's a big fear of a lot of people in the world, just to get up in front of people and get through that. And I knew that I was very fearful of that, but I also said, kind of like that backpacking and kind of like the trips you and I have been on, I want to do it, and I want it to be something I get over and that I get good at. And so that's
what is that? What is that process like for you? How do you, because I think one of the things that lots of people struggle with is just they get an idea and they want to do something, but there's always something that kind of holds them back. And I guess is it just screw it, I'm going to do it?
Well,
I think what is it?
I think you first of all have to have, back then the things that we were doing in lecturing in cosmetic dentistry had never been done before. Some of my mentors, one being Dr. Rosenthal in New York, I would sit over his shoulder at programs that I was a part of, and he would do adjustments to ceramic or adjustments to temporaries. And I would ask him, what are you doing? He goes, I don't know. He
Mm-hmm.
goes, I'm just trying to make it look more like a tooth, or I'm trying to
Right.
reshape this. There was no real verbiage for it. And I went to some
didn't even know how to talk about it, really. There was
didn't
no,
even know
like,
how to talk about it. There was no reflective surface or
right.
deflective surface, or, you know,
Or surface
the way
texture.
light,
Yeah.
surface texture.
Yeah.
There was none of that. You know, that didn't exist. So, or thickness or thinness,
Right.
or over prep or under prep. Or,
Right.
you know, we were just
winging it almost.
We were just slapping porcelain on top of teeth. Like if you had one dark tooth, you would put a piece of porcelain on there, and it, you know, it would stick out 1.5 millimeters and look like a gummy bear.
Right. but
it would block that color, darn it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just go from yellow to more yellow.
Yeah, so it was like kind of like the Wild West, wasn't it? I mean,
it was the Wild West. Yeah, it was crazy. So, long story short, I got my lecture together. I practiced it. It was only going to be a half day, and they booked me to go to Buffalo, New York, which is where Ivoclar headquarters was. And I had my slides on the plane, carrying those on to go in the overhead. And I had my suit in a hanging bag, and I was dressed in like a leather jacket that was warm. And I bought these like work boots on the streets of New York. It was kind of the cool thing back then. I had jeans on. Well, prior to this whole nerve thing of lecturing, somebody told me about the process of taking a beta blocker to help slow your heart rate down. And, you know, back then, a lot of the good golfers were using it they have the yips when they're putting.
Yeah, right.
You know, it was kind of a common thing to get it if they called it the speaker's drug. So I got a prescription for that, and I practiced it. You know, I took it a few times before to see how I felt, and I was like, yeah, you know, it really relaxed me. So I got one bag checked in. I got my carry-on suit. I got my slides, got my jeans, and my work boots. And I get to the airport, and guess what is lost? My suitcase with all my toiletries and my beta blocker. And it ain't coming in until the next day. That's the way the airlines were back then. So I am super stressed out.
Yep.
And super nervous. So I go to the lecturer. That was the opening remarks, nervous remarks of how my day and my night went. And I have my suit on with these giant work boots that I bought on the streets of New York City. And my voice is quivering, and I start my lecture, and I go about an hour or so. And I said, well, let's just take a break. And one of the great guys from Ivoclar pulled me aside. He said, can I have a moment with you? And he took me aside. He goes, you know, everybody goes through this. I know how nervous you are. You just got to think, and I know you've probably heard this before, think while you're on that podium, everybody out there is totally buck naked. And they have no idea what you're going to say.
Right.
So you just need to slow down, just relax. You're doing good, blah, blah, blah. And basically I got through the lecture. And that first time, I think once you maybe like going on a really bad ride at Carowinds or one of the parks, you know, you don't think you can do it. And then you do it and you're like, yeah, it wasn't so bad.
I did it.
So that was kind of the start. That was the start of things. And, you know, progressed.
So what year was that?
You know, I want to say it was 96 or so.
Okay.
I was involved with AEC. I was going for accreditation. I started doing more lectures. Ivoclar became kind of a cool sponsor. You know, I had taken hands-on programs at Baylor with Dr. Dickerson and Dr. Nixon.
Right.
I was involved with LVI in the very, very early days on hands-on dentistry. I started to become one of the proctors, so I would oversee other dentists
Right.
doing the veneer programs. And then I got involved in New York at NYU, doing some of those. I did lots and lots of those programs, and then involved with Pac Live a couple times with Dr. Hornbrook.
Mm-hmm.
So, I kind of
You're
did
kind
a
of all
lot
over, yeah. So
all in Kentucky.
how many presentations do you think you actually went on and end up doing?
Oh, I don't know. I have banker's boxes of presentations. So probably 20 years worth.
20 years.
I
Oh, wow.
mean, I was hired by labs. I was hired by, bigger meetings. What I realized? I realized that, and I can't tell you exactly what year, but I became friends with Steve Sweeney. Steve Sweeney was the editor publisher of Practical Perio and Aesthetics. It was a magazine which is not around anymore, but the people that were writing for that magazine and the photography and the quality of dentistry was unbelievable back then. And it just blew me away.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve was very fortunate in that he knew a couple people in Europe that plugged him into lots of new European speakers and lecturers. So
Right.
if you can imagine how Instagram is for the young kids today,
Right.
this magazine was that 20, 25 years ago.
Wow.
And so when we would go to, for instance, Chicago for like the midwinter meeting, I stayed at the Fairmont a lot, and you would go to the lobby and you would see all these amazing dentists that had written these
Mm-hmm.
articles and were doing incredible photography and dentistry. And I'm actually sitting across from him and meeting
Wow.
him, and he would introduce me. So it was a real awakening. And my lectures were coming more frequent. I mean, there was a time where I probably did 30 lectures in a year, which is a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot. And some weekends I would be gone. I would be gone for a month in a row. Every weekend I'd have something to do, or I'd be teaching somewhere hands-on. And then I started doing the same kind of programs in my office with live patients. And so I became pretty versed at teaching and chairside, and I loved it.
Yeah.
The podium is a high too. It's a great to be able to give back to people, younger kids, and mentor them. But I needed more. So I realized my skills weren't honed in, and I kept seeing all these Europeans that were amazing. And so the next trek or next chunk of time in my life really was starting to go to Europe and starting to go to big meetings over there at the European Aesthetic Academy. And then my lectures started to spread out. So I started to do some lectures in Czechoslovakia and Germany and Brazil, and just it really expanded all across internationally. I had sometimes I'd have translators, and I continue to meet people that are still to this day friends that I, thanks to social media, thanks to Facebook, thanks to Instagram, I can. I can send somebody a message. Yeah, I can send Newton Fall a message in Brazil, and I can hear back from them, or send Dr. Twatia a message in Paris, and it's just, it's great. It's absolutely the greatest thing to ever happen to me. So as far as professionally, so it's and I committed to it. I spent a lot of my own money. I was single still. I did probably 650 hours of CE. And I said, I'm going to go everywhere and try to be the best I can be and try to learn. So my philosophies are really a mix of all kinds of different people. I'm not a Dawson guy. I'm not a Pankey guy. I'm not a Spears guy. I'm not a Coyce guy. I'm not a this or that. I'm a mix of all kinds of people, which is, I think, has been really rewarding. So,
yeah, I think pigeonholing. I mean, I think getting yourself into one system, I think, can be I think learning how you learn is there's value to that, and learning to be your own person is there's value in that, right?
But more importantly too, I grew up in a farm town of 30,000 people. I never went anywhere. And I went
Mm-hmm.
4 years of college here and back to Ohio to work in the summers. And I never went anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then I opened my own office and I didn't have any money.
Right.
And I didn't do anything for another 5, 6, 7 years, until I started to do some CE and I went to Key Biscayne to Panky. I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
Miami's, that's amazing. There's people
Right.
from all over the world here, And then when I really started to get into the lecture outside of the US and the travel,
Right.
I remember my first time at Ivoclar in Liechtenstein, which is a teeny little country, just going through the airports to get there and somebody picking me up and the mountains and,
Right.
being around Switzerland and Sweden and Germany. And
Yeah.
I just, it became more of the travel
Yep.
and more of the experience and more of meeting people than it really did the dentistry.
Yeah.
And
I can see that.
oh man, that was unreal.
It's like your
really.
eyes are open to the world at that point, and like, yeah.
If you could, if you could gift your child anything in the world, I do think there's merits to a really good education.
Mm-hmm.
But travel and food and cultures, that's such a powerful education. It's sometimes way beyond what sitting in a classroom will do.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I think so there's lots of people who have never traveled, just isn't a thing, and I just feel like they're just missing out because there's just so many opportunities to learn different things than through travel. I think it's a valuable tool.
It's truly amazing.
Yeah. So then you did all this stuff while you were pretty much single, because you didn't start a family until you pretty much.
I got married. Yes, I got married at 44 finally. I had been through some relationships that just, I wouldn't say I was selfish, but I was really a little petrified of marriage and divorce. And, a lot of people I had been around had made poor decisions. Mm-hmm. And I said to myself, I am not going to be one of those poor decision makers. When I find the right thing, right person, right time, I will know it. I prayed about it, and
well, I think
that happened finally.
Yeah, that's good. And one thing that's interesting is, I think, from the sounds of it, I mean, if you're gone every weekend for months at a time, I mean, that's a pretty tough commitment to uphold and have a family at the same time. I mean, it's
correct.
Correct. I think, if there's somebody that's their career path and that's what they want to do, and if they want to have a family and stuff like that too, I mean, you kind of have to, something has to give at some level. I mean, I don't really believe in the whole we can have it all. I mean, I think at some point there are sacrifices you have to make at some point.
Yeah. And it's got to be a very understanding spouse, or you really have to set your parameters. Okay, listen, I'm going to do this 10 times a year, no more.
Right.
But the thing about the lecturing and the traveling is your book, prior to this entire thing we're going through right now, you were booked out a year, or you were booked out even a couple of years.
Right.
And so if you go out a year and your wife says, we have a brand new baby and they're getting christened, well, I'm not going to be here that week. I've already booked something. It's hard to plan your life when you're living that. But there are people that do it. They are successful with it. Their spouses are a big part of their travel. They do things together. But again, I think once I got to be married and I was 44 and I had my first child, I really said, I've done it. I checked my ego. I'm gonna kind of slowly back out of all this, and I'm gonna hang out home and raise a family and be there. So that's the way it is.
That's cool. So what would you consider after all of that? I mean, obviously you have a 16-year-old now, so that tells you that you're still a young guy, but you've lived a put a lot in those number of years. So what would you consider as your greatest success so far?
Oh gosh, a 16-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl. Well, the girl doesn't really like me right now.
Well, that's
I'm
a teenager,
hoping
right?
when I'm in my Depends in a wheelchair, she will like me.
Right. Yep.
I'm hoping it swings back around. I think professionally, I have lived a career that has respect from my peers, and I think I've given a lot back to my profession, which is always is one of my mottos. Whatever you've learned, you need to share it and give it back.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've allowed my kids to have the freedom to not be pushed in any one direction or another, whether it's sports or whether it's academics. I'm kind of letting them develop their own personalities. And I can tell you, some days, I think we all go through that. You love them, and sometimes you just say, "Oh my gosh, what have I created?"
Yeah.
I should not have done that.
Yeah.
So, I think that's good. My wife has found a career for herself, which I've fully supported the last 7 or 8 years. So I did a lot of the dad stuff, the grocery shopping, the cooking, but it's really allowed her to blossom too. And she's become a real power force in her business. And so it's a nice mix at our family. And I think that's success. I think friendships, I've developed amazing friendships. We're only on this earth a short amount of time, and maintaining and monitoring and nurturing friendships, I think, are so important.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think having at least a core group of people that you can pick up the phone with and give them a call, and they'll be there, and the vice versa. I think is there's a value in that, especially in times like this,
Absolutely.
Which is pretty cool. Any regrets?
Regrets. I moved away from my parents. At 17, I was a freshman here, and I went home for 4 years at Ohio State, and then I moved back down here. Now, the very nice thing was that all that time when I was single, I could go home at Thanksgiving. I could go home at Christmas. I was home a lot, and I buzzed here and there. And then I got less and less able to go there because of the lecture circuit. And then I got married, and then you know how that is with marriage. You end up splitting things up. We'll go here this time, here this somewhere else the next time, and now they're 91. My mom's kind of having memory lapses. My dad can't hear, so the two of them used to kind of yell at each other all day. And, they're still in their house, fortunately, and they're still relatively healthy. But I just can't get up there to see them like I used to.
Was there any animosities about that, or any? I get animosity is not the right word, but there was any discussions about that?
No, he really realized that he was old school, and what I was doing even back in '83 when I was graduating was so much different.
Yeah, different paths.
It was, and he knew I didn't want to live in my hometown, so he was totally fine with that. So, but it was always a great. It was a great feeling to see his face when he would come to visit me, and he would walk into especially my new office that I built, and he would walk around, watch me work, and he'd meet the patients. And, to this day, I still have a lot of patients say, "How's your dad?" Because they remembered his visit, but his eyes would light up to see the kind of dentistry that we were starting to do.
Right.
I mean, it was just, I don't think he ever fathomed. And then having even an opportunity to come to a couple lectures of mine, which was even more rewarding. So,
I bet that was just something.
It was pretty powerful. Yeah, pretty powerful.
That's cool. So, what's your greatest fear?
Well, I would say certainly the lecture part that I think I
Mm-hmm.
got over.
Yeah.
I think roller coasters would be up there. um, I think trapped. You remember in Chile when all those guys got stuck in that mine
Yeah.
and they had to come up in that little tube?
Yeah. You couldn't do it.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I
Claustrophobia
just
is
as
up there.
soon have somebody shoot me and leave me underneath the ground. There is no way ever I could have been in that tube. Um, and then I think, a new one, having been through this recess at home,
Yeah.
like, what am I going to do when I quit dentistry?
Right.
This is like amazingly been quite the eye-opening experience. Now, on the flip side, we're not supposed to leave our house. We're not supposed to, it's not like I'm running to Charleston to hang out for the
Right.
week or
Yep. Right.
going to the beach or, getting in a rented Airstream trailer and going
Right.
across country.
Right.
This is different.
Yep.
But it has given a lot of food for thought of what is the next part of your life. And,
Mm-hmm.
I'm 62, so I don't want that transition to be too far down the road.
Mm-hmm.
I want to still be able to enjoy it and work out and eat good
Mm-hmm.
and see a little bit more of the world,
I mean, isn't 60 the new 40 now? Isn't that what they say?
I would say so, but there are a lot of days my body does not feel like it. I can tell you that.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that there's lots of people. I've heard from I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and he has 7 partners. He's a physician. He has 7 partners, and 6 of them are all older than he is, and they're all like not racing to come back to work because they're like in Arizona playing golf every day, and they can, and they're like, seems pretty good.
It's pretty good. Yeah.
This is not the end of the world. I think
no, it's
I think
amazing.
I think as professionals, we all worry what would be like without having to go see patients and having to schedule. And I think it's an interesting time to actually just sit down and see that it's you can do it. It's not that bad.
I have had an extremely fun time searching on Netflix
Mm-hmm.
for some of the side things that you really like to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you search for instance, Gordon Ramsay, the chef,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
has a 10-episode cooking class that is so well done. And, I'm into like the 4th episode now, but, I love to cook. I love the process. It's a lot like backpacking. It's a lot like photography. You got to have the gear to do it.
Right.
So I'm learning more about the gear, and that I think dental minds kind of work that way. We like little trinkets and little tricks and tools, and so that's been really fun.
That's
and
cool.
I could see myself along with the photography part that you and I have gotten involved with. That is something down the road. So.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, it's a good time to actually just reflect on where we go from here. And I think nobody really knows, but I think at some level we'll all know that we'll be okay. And it'll be uncertain for sure, but just like embrace the uncertainty, I think is the lesson there, So what would your current self say to your young self?
My current self would say to my young self, don't get married so late in life. Only because there are, not because of the sheer knowledge of what I know now, but more of the physical attributes I had back when I was 30 and 35, and the energy and curiosity and drive.
Mm-hmm.
I think would have been better paired with my kids who are now 16 and 13.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little harder. But, again, kids their mojo comes from fast and furious and flashes of this and that, whether it be social media or my little girl does dance, and which of course is not happening now, but that was
Right.
5-6 days a week.
Right.
There's no way that I could have gone and played little league baseball with my kid 6 days a week.
Right. Right.
So, or soccer or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So, no, I wish I had a little bit more time as a young person to be with them. That's
Mm-hmm.
probably one of my biggest ones.
Yeah. But I mean, again, it's one of those trade-offs. Either you're traveling lecturing or you're, having a family. It's kind of one of those,
Yeah, exactly.
kind of hard to keep those things in.
Well, granted, I hope that the experiences of life that I had by doing that, I can instill upon them
Mm-hmm.
I want you guys to do that. This is
Yeah.
something that, you really need to see the world. And hopefully the world will be able to
To be
accept them
seen.
down the
Yeah.
road. Yes,
The world
right.
to be able to be seen. Yeah. What's your greatest inspiration?
Probably my grandfather, who
Mm-hmm.
spent so much time with me when I was a little kid, that
Yep.
was so genuine and so simple. Um, he, I think, molded me in a lot of ways. And then um, I'm always inspired by architecture.
Mm-hmm.
I think architecture is absolutely phenomenal. Um, I kind of was fascinated not too long ago with King Tut stuff,
Yeah.
just the history of Egypt and how things were done and the mindset behind these people.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Sitting around with not much in their life but food and some beverage and figuring out how to build these amazing things, that still to this day just blows me away.
Yeah.
So historically, I think I'm pretty fascinated with that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, 'cause especially like the architecture and stuff. I think one of the things that, as dentists, one of the things that people don't really, I mean, well, dentists understand this, but non-dentists don't understand like how much engineering and how much biology and how much psychology goes into our jobs. And
Oh yeah,
I think the idea of the pyramids is an interesting thought bubble for a dentist to actually consider, because it takes all of those things to actually build those things way back then. And I think, at least the cases that I treat, and I think the cases you treat, I mean, a lot of them is kind of like resurrecting a pyramid in Egypt sometimes. I mean, that's kind of how it
it it,
feels. I mean, I don't,
it really is.
that's kind of how it feels. And I think
But
that's an interesting,
but
it's an interest. Yeah.
the thing about dentistry is you really, to be a good dentist and to be a master.
Hmm.
I think I've talked about this. To be a master, you got to do three things, and I got this from Dr. Dawson. Yeah, Dr. Dawson, and only 2% of any profession is a master. So that 2%, you have to do it, you have to write about it, and you have to teach it.
Hmm.
So you got to have those three things. And the one beyond that I really feel like I have gotten good at is to be able to have the vision of what it's going to look like before you build
Hmm.
it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you can't have some sense of a vision of how that house is going to look
Right.
and how it's going to sit on that property and where the light's going to hit it,
Right.
then you don't need to start building.
Right. Yeah.
So I think it's been really interesting.
Yeah. I think that's where, actually my photography journey has actually helped my, my dentistry, because it really helps me. You start to see, you start to see as the light, start to see as the light hits objects, you start to see that. And I think
Yes.
that actually helps. We're in the weeds about dentistry, but I mean, that's really what we do, And
Yeah, I
so,
think that's been one of the joys about going on the photo trips with you guys is just that you guys are so far ahead of me right now in the perception of light
mm-hmm.
and the view through the lens through to what the final shot's going to be
Yeah.
pre uh, pre post op or pre
Right.
post shooting.
Right.
It's so beautiful, and that drives me to kind of think about, okay, I'm going to keep doing this because I want to be to that point sometime.
Yeah.
Whereas I've taken so many dental pictures.
Right.
And I've done so much with dental photography. I kind of see that right off the bat through the lens.
Right.
And I'm a little askew by, we go on Instagram now. Everybody's a dental photographer. I mean, it's just scroll after scroll after scroll, which is good. But some of it is, I'm not sure some of it is really true or really worthy of what needs to be shown. So,
yeah, there's a line. I mean, the same thing happens with all photography. I mean, at some level, there's what is reality and what is really happening there. And
correct.
I mean that it's the eye of the beholder, and I mean, that's a topic for another discussion about ethics and about personal ethics and about all of those sorts of things. And that's
I was on the high school yearbook, and I remember going in the dark room and developing black and white. I mean, that if you look at Ansel Adams and some of those people, I mean, that was true art. That was unbelievable stuff.
yeah, the stuff that those guys could, the way those guys made prints and all that stuff is just crazy. With all the limited technology that they had.
Crazy.
Yeah. Well, Tom, I mean, I know you've talked about. I was going to ask you about mentors, but you kind of listed them all off today. I mean, you are truly you pretty much set a path for yourself, and you've always thought about things to get yourself in the right direction. And one of the things that just struck me just in our chat today is like you had an innate ability to whether it was people around you or people just influences that you had, but you kind of just were able to navigate your own path. And I think that is something that you don't see a lot of. And I think a lot of people today could benefit from a story like yours that, think for yourself, do what you want to do, be the person you want to be, and then create the life that you want to live. And I think that is actually your biography, Tom. I mean, that's pretty much it.
I would very much feel good about that if that was on my gravestone. I think that's true. I don't think I've been swayed, or if I have been swayed and I didn't agree with it, then I moved on to another path.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think, as in one of my earlier podcasts, I mean, you can't allow yourself to regret, a decision based on the information you had at that time.
Oh, absolutely.
So you have to be willing to accept the information. You made the decision, deal with it, and if it wasn't good, move on.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct.
So, no, I think it's cool. You're an inspiration to me, man, for sure.
Well, you are to me too. I always have this knack for finding people in an obscure way sometimes. Or maybe it's God's way of putting me with somebody that I can usually tell within an hour, maybe even a half an hour, this is somebody I want to get to know, and this is somebody I'm going to get along with.
Right.
And I think you and Bernie and some of the other guys that certainly lots of people I've met along the time I've been on this earth, I've had that happen, and it's a really cool experience. Now, does that mean you're going to talk to them every day?
No.
Or you're going to see them all the time? But it does mean that the minute you get with them, it's like exactly like you were with them the last time. It just tails off. It's like turning the page in a book,
Yeah.
And it's a really cool experience.
It is. And I think part of getting older is realizing that you have to keep replenishing those people in your life, and you have to get them from different sources. And I think you can't rely on your old high school buddies, because a lot of them didn't go anywhere, and I think it's about, it's about finding new people at different demographics for you to help keep you centered and just making sure you're making the right decisions. I mean, you're making your own decisions, but it's just making sure that you're on the path that you should be for yourself.
I think at our age, we get to a point where we have one or two people that, man, you call them tomorrow at 1:30 in the afternoon, and you need them by 5, they'll be there.
Right.
They'll figure out a way to get there. So
for sure.
Those people are really critical, and they tell you, no, you don't need to do that.
Right. Yeah. You don't need to spend $10,000 tomorrow. You're fine, or
Right.
whatever.
Not a good idea. Yeah.
All right, Tom. Thank you. I
All right,
appreciate
Doug.
it. It was a great chat, and thank you.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Be safe and look forward to seeing you sometime down
Yep,
the road.
for sure.